What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another Swift video. In today's video, we're going to be learning all about core data and all the operations you would want to do with it. So here we've got a to-do list app, which we're going to be building so we can query out all of our to-do list items here. We can hit this plus button and we can enter a new item. So let's do demo. Go ahead and submit that, and you can see that it actually puts it into our to-do list. And the important thing is if we close this and reopen, you'll see that it is persisted. We can select one of these items and we can go ahead and delete it, and it actually deletes it and updates our UI. And finally, we can go ahead and even edit one of these items. So I'm going to come in here and just edit this, and this is going to be do something else. We're going to go ahead and save it, and you can see that it actually updates there right in our to-do list in real time. So first things first, make sure you absolutely destroy that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Helps out with all the videos in the channel. Might even help you learn core data a little faster, wink, wink. And that said, hit subscribe while you're at it. If you're new, welcome to the channel. Let's get into some core data. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started by opening up Xcode and creating a new project here. We're going to stick with the app template under iOS. Let's go ahead and call this project core data example. You're going to want to make sure your language is Swift and your lifecycle UI kit interface storyboard. And the most important thing, make sure this box is checked for use core data. No need to check this cloud kit box. Go ahead and continue. We'll toss it onto our desktop to get started. Looks like I got a folder with the same name, so I'm just going to go ahead and replace it here. And once you've got this created, let's expand our Xcode window to give ourselves a little more room to work. And I'm also going to hit that run button with this simulator that I've got booted. I believe it's the 12 Pro Max. And we should see our empty application just like so. So cool, first things first, let's get straight into core data. So what you'll notice is that by checking that box of use core data, you actually got this file created down here, which is actually a XC data model. Now, what is this? Basically, this is where you're going to create the objects visually and their properties that you can save into the core data database. So if you imagine if you have a struct in SwiftUI, or Swift, rather, in our case, we're not using SwiftUI here, and you want to save it into your application, you basically need to tell core data what you want to save. And what they're called here are entities, actually. So we're going to come down here and hit this plus button to create a new entity, and it's going to pop up something up here. And I'm going to go ahead and call this item a to-do list. Let's make sure we get our casing correct. Item. Go ahead and hit enter, and to edit it, if you're not aware, you can just click on it and hit enter. It becomes editable. And we have this item here now that we can save into core data, but we want to add attributes to it. And attributes are basically the properties on our object that we're going to want to go ahead and save. So we're going to go ahead and hit this plus button here, and it creates a property here. I'm going to go ahead and give this a name. It's going to be called name, and we want to make sure we give it a type. So a name is going to be a string. And let's give it one more. So I'm going to give it one more. This is going to be created at, and you guessed it, this is going to be a date. Whoops, not that. We want the one right above it. We want a date. And the cool thing is this is all we need to do here, and we can actually have Xcode generate a lot of the code, rather all of the code that we need to reference this in our code. So on the right panel here, you'll see there is this box for code gen, and you can see there's three values here. There's manual, class definition, and category and extension. So you can actually do it like this, and when you run your application, it's going to go ahead and actually generate the code on the fly. But what we're going to do is a little different. We're going to change it to be manual so we can see another way to do it. And after we do that, we're going to come up to our toolbar, and we're going to go to editor. And in here, you want to find create NS managed object subclass. Go ahead and hit that, and we'll talk about what this is in just a moment. All the defaults should be good, so just hit enter 3 times, and it's going to create some files for you. You'll notice 2 things here. So let's firstly drag this into our yellow folder here, and I'm going to be a little organized here and select these. Right click and do new group from selection. And we're going to go ahead and call this a to-do list item. So let's take a look at what it created. So first it created this public class, which is marked as a subclass of NSManaged object. And then it also created this other file here, which is an extension of that class, which has some pre-filled out code, which is core data related. And what is this code? So the first thing here we have is this fetch request. And the fetch request is how we can actually query out all of the to-do list items we've saved in core data. And then here we have the actual properties that get saved inside of core data. So the name and the date. So you'll notice we have this NSManaged thing going on here. So what is NSManaged? Basically anything that you want to save in core data, you need to work with a managed context. You can think of it as an intermediary between the actual saved data in the database and your app. So instead of talking about theory, let's go ahead and do an example. Before we write that code in our view controller to list out our data and enter some data, one thing to take note of, which is really important actually here in your app delegate, is when you check that box to create your project with core data, it actually puts some more code in here for you. The first thing you'll see is this persistent persistent container. And the persistent container is more or less your database. This is where your data, you can access it, where you can read it and save it. And speaking of saving, it actually also gave you this handy little save context function on here that you can actually call. It actually checks if you have any changes on your context, and it does a save of your context. But we're going to be writing some of our own code out. So let's jump to our view controller and let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. So we're going to create a basic to-do list app, and in a to-do list app, we're going to need to get all of the values that are saved. So let's create a function for that. Let me also bump up the font size a little bit here, so it's nice and large. So we're going to say get all items. We're also going to want to have a function to create an item, and it's going to take in a name. We're going to want another function to delete an item. And this is going to basically take in a simple item, which is a to-do list item, which if you recall is that generated class that Xcode gave us when we created it. And let's see, we want to get them all, we want to create them, and let's also take a look at updating a core data item. So we're going to go ahead and create a function called update item. And once again, in here, we're going to pass in a to-do list item. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to implement the core data stuff first, since that's the core part of the video. And then I'll also hook it up to some nice UI with a table view. But let's do this stuff first, since it's basically the point of this video. So how do we get all the items out of our database that are to-do list items? So we're going to say let items, and we're going to basically want to query out of the database all the items. And before we do that, we actually need to get that context thing that I was talking about before. And we need to get it in a global way so we can use it in all of our other functions here. So bear with me, we're going to add something here. We're going to call it context. And it's going to be equal to UI application shared. And we want to get the delegate of the application. And we're going to force cast it to our app delegate. Now let's put this in some parentheses. And off of this guy, we're going to get the persistent container. Let's see if I can find that here. Here it is, persistent container. And off of this, we want to grab the view context. And the context is where you can actually go to perform objects in the core data database. So in our example here of getting all the items, we're going to say let items, and we're going to add here on the other side of the equal context, and we want to basically, we want to fetch actually with a request, and you'll see that the fetch actually takes a NS fetch request. And we can actually just use the first constructor there. But what do we pass into here? Now, if you recall in the generated code, if you go to the extension here, on the to-do list item, it actually gave us a class function of fetch request. So let's go back to our view controller, and actually you can use that directly. And what's super nice is that it generates it for you, so we can be lazy about it. And we don't have to write that code ourselves. So here we can say fetch request, just like that. And items actually now, if you start typing it, items will be an array of any, we're going to want to go ahead and cast it to be an array of actual to-do list items. So now we're getting an error here that this call can throw. So we want to move this whole statement inside of a do catch block. So here we're going to say do. We're going to put that there. We want to prefix this with try. And we want to put a catch down here. And I'm not going to do anything here, but in a real app, of course, you want to go ahead and handle your actual error. It's just going ahead and yelling at me that we're creating items here, but not using it. But we can leave that put for now. So that's how you go ahead and get all your items out of a database in core data. How do we create an item? So creating an item is also very, very simple. So just like you would create any other instance of a class, we're going to say a new item is a to-do list item, and we're going to create it with a context. And similar to what we have done up above, we'll pass in the context here, which is this guy we created right here. And this is how we're going to create a to-do list item with that context. Now on here, we can go ahead and assign its properties. So the name is going to be the name. The created at will be the date. Now you're not done after you've created it. We still need to save it into the database. So how do we go ahead and save it in the context? Well, similar to before in a do catch statement, we're going to go ahead and we're going to say try, context, and we're going to call save on this guy. Make sure you put a try before it and toss it into a do catch. Otherwise, you'll get the same error that we were hitting up here. Now let's go ahead and do the delete function here. So pretty simple. We're going to say context. We're going to call delete. And then similarly, we want to call save on the context. So we're going to be lazy and copy and paste this code. Super simple. That's how you delete something from core data. And of course, we're going to take a look at updating as well. So updating here, we're passing in an item. Presumably, we want to go ahead and update the name on it. So we're going to say name parameter. Let me go ahead and actually call it new name. And here, I'm going to go ahead and say item.name is going to be new name. And once again, once you've assigned, or either reassigned the property, you want to call save on the context. So I'm just going to once again copy this and paste it. And that's how you can get all the data out of core data, how you can insert new data, how you can delete, and how you can update. Now let's go ahead and just hit that run button and make sure it's working. And we're going to hook it up to some pretty nifty looking UI for our to-do list app. So cool, definitely compiling, definitely working. Let's go ahead and put together that awesome table view for our to-do list. So I'm going to put a comment here for core data, just so we can organize our code a little bit. Here we're going to have a title, and this title is going to be, let's call it to-do list. Or we can call it a core data to-do list, just like that. And we're going to want a table view. If you're not familiar with table views, I've got a bunch of videos on table views already on the channel. So definitely go take a peek there to learn more about table views. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly in terms of actually setting it up for the sake of time, and because this isn't really a video about table views. But here we're just creating a table view, going to register a cell with it. We're going to want to make sure we add this as a sub view to our view and assign this guy's delegate and data source. And of course, we need to give this guy a frame as well. Now we're going to see some errors here because we have not conformed to the delegate and data source protocols here. So here we're going to say the delegate and data source protocols. And we wouldn't bring in those required functions. So number of rows, go ahead and toss 1 there for now. We're going to hook it up to the number of to-do list items we have. And here we're going to say cell for row at index path. Let's see if I can find it. I'll just stop being lazy and type it out. And here we're going to want to go ahead and create our cells. So I'm going to go ahead and say table view, DQ a reusable cell with an ID of cell for identifier, and we're going to return that cell just like that. Here we're going to say the text label, .text is going to be some text. We'll just say hello world for now. All right. Now, we want to have a property that's global that can drive the number of cells in our table view. So here we're going to create a private var, and it's going to be called model. And this is going to be an array of to-do list items. And what we can actually go ahead and do in here now, when we say get all of these items, we can actually assign that to our models, since this is going to actually go ahead and return an array of to-do list items. And after we do that, on the table view, we can actually call reload here. And that's just going to go ahead and reload our data in the UI. But because it's a UI operation, we want to make sure we do it here on the main thread. If you're not familiar with this, basically, anything UI related should be done on the main thread. Anyways, we're going to go back to this, and for number of rows, we're going to return the number of models that we have, so the number of to-do list items. So looking pretty good. Now in here, we're going to say the current model, or the current to-do list item in our models is the nth position, and from it, we can assign this as model.name, just like that. Beautiful. And if we actually go ahead and run it, we should basically be able to compile and launch our app, but we're not going to see anything in it. We definitely need a way to add a to-do list item, and we're going to add a plus button up here at the top right to do that. Now we're going to jump into our main storyboard for just a moment here. And I know I'm going a little fast, and I'm going to review everything before we wrap up the video here, but select your controller. In the toolbar, go to editor, and you want to find embed in, and we're going to toss this controller in a navigation controller. That'll give us a nice looking navigation bar up here. And I personally prefer the large title. So open up that right panel, which is the attributes inspector. Under this tab, just go ahead and check that and give your app a run. And you should now see a title up here, which we gave in our actual code. And now let's go back and add that plus button so we can take a look at how we can bring in new to-do list items. So how do we bring in that plus button? So it's going to be a navigation item. So here at the bottom of view did load, I'm going to say navigation item, and we're going to assign the right bar button item as a UI bar button item. We're going to give this guy a title. We could, instead of giving it a title, give it a system bar button item, and I believe it's called add. Target is self, and action is going to be did tap add, which is a selector, aka a function that we have not created yet. So let's go ahead and create it right below it. Now, what do we want to do when we tap this add button? Well, just for the sake of keeping this simple, we're going to show an alert, and that alert's going to have a text field where we can type in a to-do list entry. So let's go ahead and create an alert, which is going to be a UI alert controller with a title of new item. Enter new item for the message. The style will be an alert. Once we create the alert, at the end, we're going to want to, of course, present said alert. We're going to want an action in the alert. So we're going to say add action. We're going to say UI alert action. And this is going to have a title of submit, a style of cancel, and a handler in here like so. We also want to add a text field on here by just calling add text field like this. And let's see, we've got a configuration handler that we can be lazy and pass a nil for. Now, once we go ahead and submit on this alert, we want to get the text out of the actual alert, the text field in the alert rather. So here we're going to say guard let field equals alert dot text fields dot first, and let text equals text field. What did I call it? Field rather dot text. And once we get both of those out of there, let's also guard that the text is not empty, because if the text is empty, we don't want to actually go ahead and enter anything into coredata because that's a little silly. If it is not empty, we're going to go ahead and we're going to call our function that we created before, which is create item, and the name is going to be our text. Now we're going to want to go ahead and make this weak self so we don't create a memory leak. So go ahead and throw a question mark right there to make it optional. If you're not familiar with memory leaks and retain cycles, I've got a video on that as well. But that's how we're going to take care of creating that. So before we move forward, let's go ahead and make sure that actually works. So let's take a look at our create function down here. After we create something, we actually want to do something that we're not doing here. After we create it successfully, we actually want to say get all items. And what this is going to do is now it's going to refresh our models and reload our table view here. So let's go ahead and hit Command R to build and run. Hopefully we have no errors. Looks like we don't. We're going to hit this, so we should see our alert here. And let me also pop up that keyboard by going to IO, keyboard, and toggle that software keyboard so we can see what it'll actually look like on a device. So here I'm going to say, let's say get milk. Why not? It's not actually something I need to do, but sounds like something people would have to do. So there's our get milk. Let's go ahead and create something else. To create YouTube video. All right. Now the coolest part is let's go ahead and delete this app, rather instead of deleting and close the app and delete it from multitasking and reopen it. And the coolest thing about this is that that data should actually be showing up here. So let's see what we missed, because it's not. So what we actually missed is we're not actually calling that get all function here. So in view.load, let's go ahead and call that get all items before we set up the table. And your data should persist, hence a database, and there is our data. So we can close the app here, open it up, and we still see our data. Now, if you recall, we're also saving the date in here. So let's actually show that here in the cell as well. So where is our cell for row function? All right, here it is. Here, what we can go ahead and do inside of a string, we can interpolate the actual name as well as the created at, which is a date, just for the sake of making sure that this works. And once we go ahead and run it, you can see we are actually saving the milk, get milk, and the date here. Now they're wrapped in optionals, so you could unwrap them, but for the sake of making sure our app looks a little nicer, let's do some undos there to just have the name once again, just like that. Now let's take a look at how you can modify or delete these entries. So right now, when you select one of those items, nothing happens. One of those table view rows, I should say. So we're going to implement did select row at index path. We're going to go ahead and call deselect on it at the index path with an animation. Now in here, we're going to want to show an action sheet with two options to either delete or edit. I'm going to be lazy and copy and paste this alert. We're going to modify some code. This is going to turn into a sheet. This is going to be, let's call this edit, nil for the message. This will be an action sheet. We don't want to add anything on here. This is going to be a sheet. And let's see, what do we want in here? So the first option that we're going to add into our action sheet is going to be cancel with no handler. So that's perfect. Just get rid of all of that code. Down here, we're going to want to call present on the sheet itself. So let's see, looks like we've got an error here for actually adding this. Let's just go ahead and retype out this code for the sake of making sure we get it done correctly. So add action, UI alert action with a title of, let's do cancel, cancel, and nil. And we're going to want two more. This one is going to be edit, delete, default, and destructive will give you that red title, which looks a little scary. All right, we're going to do that and do that. So when the user hits this delete option in here, it's pretty simple. What do we want to do? We want to say self, and we want to go ahead and say delete item and pass in the item. Now we need to get the item out first that we selected. So up here, we're going to say item is models. And in models, we want to get the selected item, which is at indexpath.row, just like that. We want to make sure we go ahead and do weak self here as well to make sure we don't create a retain cycle. Now, edit is going to be a little different. For edit, we actually want to copy the code up here again and paste it, which is all this alert business. So copy that, throw that in there, and let's take a look at what we want to do. So here we're going to change this to be edit item. We're going to say edit your item. The name by default, we are actually going to set in this field. So here I'm going to say alert text fields, the first text field, and I believe we can just force unwrap that. Hopefully we should be able to. All right, first, and we're going to assign its text to be the item.name. This way your text will be pre-filled in when you tap on that edit. And let's see what else we want to do here. So here we are doing submit. Let's change this to save. And instead of creating a new item here, we're going to go ahead and say update item, pass in the item. And we're going to go ahead and instead of calling this text, we're going to call this new name, and make sure you change it here as well. And we're inside of a closure here itself. So go ahead and do self. And I know we didn't put weak self up here, but just for the sake of not having to add a bunch of more optionals, we should be in business. So let's go ahead and hit Command R to build and run. Let me change this to dark mode so it looks a little cooler. And let's add some more entries. So the next one I'm going to add is go on a run. And we get it added there. Let's get rid of this milk business. So we're going to select it. It's telling me I can edit it. Okay, so let's say I remembered that I needed something else. We're going to hit edit. And I'm going to change this. Whoops. It's like I hit the option there to get dictation. But we're going to go ahead and change this. Let's try that one more time so I don't keep seeing that pop up there. So we're going to hit get milk. We're going to hit edit. And we're going to go ahead and actually delete all of this. And I'm going to change this to get candy because that's way nicer than milk. We're going to go ahead and save it. And you'll notice here that we didn't actually update this. So what gives? So let's take a look at our update function. So where is our update function? What we forgot to do here is once we go ahead and change it, we want to go ahead and call that get all items function again. So we get the refreshed items. And I believe we're going to need to do that here as well. And let's go ahead and build and run. So what happened there is our database should have gotten updated, but our actual view didn't update. So let's try that one more time. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this. And this is now going to be go lift weights. We're going to go save it. And you'll see that it changes in real time, just like that, looking awesome. Let's go ahead and select that, delete it, and you can see it deletes as well. And of course, the most important part of all of this is because it's core data and it's a database and it persists on the device, if you close and reopen the app, all your data is still there. You can go ahead and edit it and it'll update. You'll notice this one remained updated. And yeah, that's basically a fairly good primer, I would hope, of core data. So let's do a quick review and then we'll call it a wrap for this video. So before we review, if you haven't done so already, make sure you destroy the like button. It helps out the video and the content quite a bit. But let's get into that review. So the first thing we did is we came into this Xcode data model and we created a new entity with the plus button down here. We called it a to-do list item. We went ahead and added two properties in here of type date and string. In the attributes inspector, if you open this up and select in here, you can choose how you want to do code generation. We made it manual for the sake of learning a little bit more. Once we made it manual, we went to editor. In editor, we clicked on create NS managed object subclass. Anything that you want core data to manage needs to be a subclass of NS managed object. Now, the reason they created this and it's empty is because if you wanted some custom functionality, you can put it in here. However, it also created the basic stubbed out code that you need in this extension here, which gives you the fetch request as well as your managed properties. The next thing we looked at in the app delegate was if I can find the app delegate, there it is, the persistent container, which is where all your actual data gets persisted, hence the name. We took a look at this convenient little save context function right here. And then the rest of our time was spent in the view controller, which in all reality is actually not a lot of code, even though, what does it look like? Looks like about 148, but it's not that much actually. So if we disregard actually 90% of this, the important stuff for core data is we created a context. Now we got our app delegate, so we cast it. If we made it optional, you would have to make your actual property optional. So this is a persistent container. You would need to change this to be optional. And your actual object here now would need to also be optional. So you would just need to change all of your calls down here, which is why for this example, I just force unwrapped it. In an actual application, you probably don't want to do that just for the sake of being crash free. Here we have a table view. We configure the table view and add a plus button at the top right. Let's take a look at our actual database functionality down here. So here, to actually get all the items, we simply create a fetch request of the to-do list item fetch request on the context. And that basically just queries out all the to-do list items. Refresh the table view. In the actual function to create an item, we create this item with a context, which is our global property we just looked at. We assign the actual values here. For created at, we're just assigning the current date, and the name is the parameter that comes in. And most importantly, don't forget to call save on your context, otherwise it won't actually save. In the delete function, we just call delete on the context for the item we want to get rid of. Make sure you save. And finally, for update, we go ahead and pass in the new name for the item we want to update. We assign it, and at the end of it, call save and refresh our data. And there you have it. That is how to use core data in your apps in Swift. Most apps these days have some sort of database and persistence. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. I always love hearing from you guys. Video suggestions, did you find it helpful? Questions, clarifications? If you just want to say hi down below, I find it amazing that so many of you guys get any type of value from these videos. It really inspires me to make more videos. So definitely say hi down below. Hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. I think like 70% of you watch consistently but have not hit that big red button. So make sure you hit subscribe and join the party for iOS videos, Swift UI, the whole 9 yards. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.